So, welcome to the fourth and the final video of how PR and communications work together. If you watched all three before this one, then well, clap for yourself. Anyway, I'm going to try to make this a bit faster than I did with the others. So what we're trying to do here is find the similarities and the differences between public relations and communications, working from traditional PR to strategic public relations to strategic communications. And we've done about 3 videos where we've looked at different practice areas within the field and shown how each, either traditional PR or strategic, how it plays out in all of those spaces, what they do and what they do not do. And we've seen differences. We've seen a few places where, there were 1 or 2 places where we could see that there was almost no difference between what strategic PR does and strategic comms does. I think the only place where I could say that categorically was in the management of how traditional media platforms are being used. But everywhere else, I could see a clear difference between how strategic public relations looks at it, works in a particular space, and how strategic comms works in another space. And the point I would like to make is that I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I'm saying for several contexts, some are sufficient. For certain contexts, you would need to do a bit more. And that there are times when comms, if you're a comms specialist, you need to lean on PR specialist or PR specialism if you have it, or PR skills to get something done. And there's certain times when if you're a PR person or a PR specialist or you're in a PR role, you may still need to borrow, lend, access communication specialist skills to help you with certain things. And that's why we're saying how PR and comms work together. We're not working against one another, we're working together. But you need to know the limitations of your practice area, your skill, your competence, and your expertise, and know when you need more skills or a different set of skills. That's the point of these videos. So when it's about research, data, and insights, we have talked about analytics and measurement in the last video. So traditional PR tends to rely primarily on information from established traditional media and stakeholder channels. They tend to look down on social media. They do not necessarily acknowledge its credibility. That's been my observation. I talked about this in the last video. For strategic PR, I think there's a combination of in-person, digital, but more in person. Although that may not, yeah, I think it depends though, but generally I would say there's just a mix. So let's not say 80%. I have an 80-20 there. It may or may not be true. But that's been my observation that research, and again, I think this is country specific because I think some countries are very strong even in their PR research than others. But I've seen that communications people tend to be more research heavy. That's been my observation. And when I mean research that is not based on lived experience. They tend to really go like this, very research, online research, desktop research. There's just a whole lot more study based whatever, because you can't really do communications work without being able to do communications research. Because yeah. So anyways, and if you have a different view, let me know. So analytics, I would say for traditional PR, they tend to use lived experience, reported analysis to guide approach. That's how we used to do it back in the day. We just do it like what are the media highlights saying? Okay, most of them are saying this, just like a manual sweep, and you rely on, you get, opinions from trusted sources, and you rely on that and you run based on that. So you analyze what's going on. Your analysis of what's going on is really based on what your trusted sources are saying and your own lived experience. For strategic public relations, I think it's a mix of what has been traditionally reported, what their lived experience, and then digital and social media, and also AI enabled. But like I said, strategic comms is largely online, very reliant on digital knowledge and AI. Lived experience is more of a supportive element rather than a driving one. I think in PR generally they would if they want to weight the importance of an approach, they'll probably put more weight on lived experience than on anything else generated elsewhere. Again, that's what I think. That's what I observe in my local context. I think for strategic comms people, we will, even if our lived experience is different, I think we tend to high grade data a bit more. Again, also because we are communicating to a broad set of people, so we also have to recognize that even though my lived experience does not support this, it probably means that's because I am only exposed to a particular demographic of people. That doesn't mean that this is representative of everybody. So we cannot run a strategy based on our own lived experience. But in PR, you can't do that because to a very large extent, you are going to be relating with the stakeholders. You are only focused on a specific set of stakeholders, and you know them personally enough to be able to make a judgment call. Do you understand what I'm saying? The context is just different because in PR, like I said, you're dealing most of the time with already known and identified stakeholders. But in comms, we're responding, and we're aiming to communicate with both the known and the unknown, both the understood and the not so understood. So creative writing and speeches, I'm not sure if I've written this before, but okay, I'd written publication. So I'm now narrowing down to speeches. So in the traditional PR space, I think primarily created for delivery in person and in hard copy format. That's really, I think, the way speeches are written. They tend to be very traditional. Strategic public relations works primarily on editorial content that is more stakeholder targeted. Again, like I've said, visual content is more for physical presentation, videos at conferences and launches. For strategic comms, I think they work with editorial and visual content with a strong focus on social media and online viewing, digital and mobile first approach. I would say the creative writing, this on the speech element, I would say there's not much difference between strategic PR and strategic commerce. But on the creative writing, I would think there's a whole lot more creative writing done on strategic. Well, it's almost the same. It depends. I mean, but with strategy comes you really go all the way out. I think one thing I probably left out of this is visual communications. Strategic communications tends to really go for a very digital visual communication. They really go all the way, infographics, what kind of immersive experience are we creating? For strategic PR, there'll be more of that, but like in an in-room experience, conferences and town halls, there will also be online, but generally comes people a lot of what we do tends to be more digital facing. Sponsorships and donations, very traditional approach for traditional PR. Event is carried out in person, reported by established media that is most relevant. There may be some social media coverage, but it will be very minimal. Sometimes there could be a lot of social media buzz, but like I said, they would rather do media and social media. And to really make you understand how these things work, because when I say some of these things, I mean, I've gotten some feedback, which it's good to contextualize. In the last elections, for instance, the Democratic Party brought a lot of influencers to their convention. They favored a lot of social media influencers, and they got a lot of backlash for that from mainstream media who felt that why would they be doing that? That they felt those kind of platforms should be for them. So, and that was quite a new approach for the Democrats. I don't know whether they'll do that next year, bearing in mind how things panned out. But the Republicans maintained the traditional approach, which is mainstream media, continue to drive the agenda through Fox News, although they also used the podcast, some of their, so I think they also did new media, but they used it in a different way, not for the convention, but when their candidates went in and had a 2-hour session with the most popular podcast person in the world currently, I think, in terms of listening and all of that and downloads. So that's that. So traditional. So what I'm saying is that in people's minds, particularly institutions and politics, there's a big difference between traditional media and social media. They have not blended, they have not fused. And we as practitioners need to understand that. And that even in that media space, even within the social space, there's a difference between social media attached to a mainstream media outlet as opposed to social media based on influencer. There is a big crossover when you go into that influencer space. And like I said, this played out in the US recent elections because people questioned why the Democrats went outside of mainstream media to attack people who were, I mean, to not attack, to leverage on or to attract people in as part of their communication strategy who were just as in influencers 100%. They're not attached to any network. They are just people, TikTokers, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. But people who have their content is focused on politics and that kind of thing. So anyway, that's that. So on leadership communication, so have I finished? Okay, sponsorship and donations, very traditional. Then for strategic public relations, is typically in-person events, VIP protocols, the handle of the stakeholder management and relationship around that. If there's a sponsorship or donation drive, for the strategic com specialists, they will focus more on the impact storytelling element, as well as the pre-event buzz and also the post-event. Now, remember I talked about this, okay, in the last video I spoke about that, where I've noticed that whenever events happen, people who have more of a PR leaning will focus more on the pre-event attendance and participation, in-room experience, and all of that, and the thank yous after, and then maybe 7 days after is done. But the communications people focus on amplifying the impact of that event 60 to even 60 days after. I mean, I attended an event like a day ago, yesterday, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago. And of course, which is what I always do when I attend some of these events. I created my own content. I don't have the patience to wait for, others to do it for me. And because it was an event I was sort of like supporting in some way. And I created a lot of content. I've seen that live posting is so important and all of that. And I was just telling someone that I was surprised at how much engagement those posts got afterwards. But this is a culture that I developed when I was communications manager working full time for a major organization, for a long time, and as the corporate communications manager. I would have my team on ground. They would be creating the content which would go corporately, but I would still always create my own content for my own pages and I always found out that the impact from my post-event content was always different. And sometimes I would feel like it was even more than the online, experience. I do not say it. I would say more people tended to hear about the post-event amplification than those who were actually in the room, if that makes sense to you. So maybe we had only 300, 400 people in the room, maybe even 500, maybe 1,000. But then more people would engage with the content afterwards. So I have always learned to, oh yes, okay, we have a good event, invite people and all of that whenever I do events. But I personally pay more attention to post-event amplification, and I make sure that my team does that as well. And again, because I tell them that content lives forever, the event comes and it goes. So that's that. So and that's a communications training. That's a strategic communications training. But a PR training is about, oh, the event went well, our stakeholders were happy, and which is good. So I think what is ideal is lean on that comms post-event amplification mindset, and also leaning on the PR, wanting to make sure that the in-person or the live event experience is also good. So leadership communications for a traditional PR person is externally focused, primarily for the purpose of relationship building and image, again, promoting. For strategic PR, is also only external as well, all about, the conferences. It's also very much about image making, brand building, executive presence, brand visibility. So it's a little bit more expansive than the traditional PR. But for strategic communications, it's very much focused on internal and external audience. And this is a big thing for communication specialists. And if you are in this space, you are accountable for development and deploying leadership messaging offline and online to internal and external audiences. The objective is for engagement, is for listening. It is very often non-promotional. Very, very often. Whereas in the strategic PR time, when leadership communication is used in a brand visibility image making sense, in strategic communications is not always about, in fact, it's never about image. It's more about reputation. Because like I said, reputation is a long term, so we're building very slowly. We're not just presenting. In fact, sometimes you can even present flaws just to show how you have changed and evolved over time. So it's not at all about just looking good, but it's about building trust and reputation. It's completely different. So leadership communications, there's thought leadership, there's reputation. Of course, you can't be a thought leader and be selling something. A thought leader is giving out information for public good. So if you want to position your leader as a thought leader, you cannot now be using muscle to promote your products. So that's why I said that strategic communications is completely different to some extent. So thought leadership, reputation, brand building, issues and crisis management. So you find out that in communications, if in most of these kind of spaces, even though you may want to use you don't directly promote, it's indirect, but you focus on promoting the brand, and then you leave it to the marketing team to then use that reputation trust to then sell whatever they want to sell. So it's just a whatever. So the leadership communication, you also humanize the brand, also involved in employee engagement, which of course PR will not do and is not supposed to do, and then change management within the organization. These are all things that we use leadership communications to do, and it's under the strategic communication specialist space. Finally, in terms of policy standard and procedures, and I think we've covered this a bit in strategy and planning, but just to bring this to a close, in traditional PR is focused on PR, media, and stakeholder management. These are the other frameworks that the others work with, which I had said before: PR, media, stakeholder, sponsorships, policies, And for strategic communications, internal and external, crisis management, strategic home, social media policy, there's just a lot. Stakeholder management too features in here. So with that, we come to the end of our videos on how public relations and communications work together, how they are different, the areas of convergence, the areas of divergence, the big difference between traditional PR and strategic comms, and the fact also that traditional PR is still relevant in institutions in terms of respect and recognition, but also understanding the limitations in times of issues and crises. And also, I think strategic public relations is the best place for all of any comms manager to be in, because there's a lot that you will learn. It helps you to manage relationships in person, helps you to be able to manage the personalities and to leverage on the relationships in a way that makes sense as well. So I would say if you're in a corporate communications role, you would need to lean on skills on both sides. Depending on your own individual experience, your background, you may find out that you're leaning to one side more than the other. But just having that spectrum and knowing where your limitations are, like even I, as what I would call a comms specialist, even though I started out in PR, I know when I need specialist skills in media or public relations or events management. If I'm running an event, I will get somebody to manage the event for me. But the strategy, I will do the strategy. But the event, I'll get somebody to work out the implementation of that event. I will get media specialists, I will get social media specialists. But the overall comm strategy, I will do that. So do you understand what I mean? Because I understand the differences in the areas. But I will not now, because I happen to be coordinating everything, then present myself as though I know everything, or I'm at the same level with everything. No, I know where the limitations of my expertise lie. I know the boundaries, I know the spectrum, I know the depth, I know the reach, I know the focus, and I know when I would need support, and if I wanted to grow personally in a particular area, I also know what I need to do to begin to grow in that area. So that's what how I think we would all help ourselves in terms of how we practice this profession. I hope this has been useful for you. Please let me know in the comments. Thank you very much. And please share with anyone that you think would also benefit from this. Thank you and stay well.